Okay. Now let's start part 2. How to sit quietly with God. How to sit quietly with God, part 2. This time I'm going to tell you a story. So we just covered the basic steps. How do I sit quietly with God? Number 1, you recognize I am silence. Silence is my nature. Silence is what I am. I've always been silence, not silent. I am silence itself, the absence of thought, the absence of movement, the absence of anything, just pure beingness. And once you have that silence, and you don't have to try for it, you don't have to strain for it, once you have it, then you just set the awareness that God is here. And then you just sit quietly in God's presence, okay? Now, what will happen is some of you who are smarty pants will start to ask for something, okay? Yes? And so I'm going to tell you a story, a true story about this. Now, this is a friend of mine. His name is Sridhar Krishnamurti. True story. Sridhar is a Hindustani classic musician. He plays a sarod. He was very popular in the 70s and 80s, but he was a yogi and actually really didn't care about, the fame and popularity of those days. He's a contemporary of Ustad Allah Rakha. He played concerts with Zakir Hussain in those days. He's friends with Pandit Sri Ravi Shankar, in that kind of circle of famous musicians. He played for a number of Bollywood songs, the musical scores and so forth, and a number of concerts, especially in Europe where he was very popular. He resides in London. Now, Sridhar would come to the US about once a year when I was studying at Duke in my medical school days. And so I had a chance to interact with him on a yearly basis during his visits. And he would come and spend a lot of time with me. And Sridhar's mother was a very ardent devotee of our Swami. And in the late 1940s, 1950s, when Swami would come from Puttaparthi to Madras, now called Chennai, Swami would come and visit their house. And he would actually stay with them. I mean, imagine the good fortune. And Sridhar was telling me how one time he and Swami were sitting on the sofa. Sridhar was 5 years old at the time. And Swami said to him, I'm going to teach you a special pranayama. Pranayama, this type of breath control exercise. I want you to practice this every day. Will you do this? And Sridhar's like 5 years old. He says, okay, Swami, And so Swami teaches him this pranayama. And then Swami watches him do it and then corrects him and says, I want you to do this every day, but you will not see the benefits for another 50 years. Sridhar's 5 years old. 50 years is like till next Monday, So whatever. He says, okay, Swami. And so he practices. And Swami would come back and Swami would actually watch him and correct his practice of this pranayama. And Sridhar said, yes, 50 years later, I did see the benefit. I could see the power of what Swami had taught me. Now, Sridhar's family, they were actually devotees of a very great Himalayan yogi who was a master nada yogi. That is, a yogi who uses sound for healing. And this Guruji, I won't give his name, was a real master. In fact, once Sridhar asked his Guruji, he said, Master, how old are you? And he's a little kid at this time. And Guruji said, well, I was the guru to your grandfather's grandfather. But he never revealed his age. Now, when Sridhar was around 8 years of age, his Guruji came down from the Himalayas and he came to their house and he examined Sridhar's hands. And he said to his parents, these hands are made to play the sarod. And with his parents' permission, because his parents understood they were on the spiritual path, his Guruji took Sridhar with him. And Sridhar lived in a cave in the Himalayas for the next 20 years, studying the sarod and becoming a master of that instrument. Every day they would practice for 10 to 12 hours per day. Their style of practice was very different from the traditional musical practice we have nowadays. Sridhar was telling me in one of the caves, they had a cave complex where they lived in. In one of the caves, they had inside the cave paintings of different scenes from the Mahabharata, from the Ramayana, and different parts of the Hindu epics. And so what would happen for the Guruji and one of the students would go inside the cave and the other students would wait outside. The Guruji would quietly point to one of the paintings And then the student would have to play that scene through his or her musical instrument. They were all boys, through that musical instruments, and the other students outside would have to tell which scene was being played. And this is how the Guruji taught them to play with emotion. Imagine, this was the rigor of their classes. Now, one time, it just so happened that in their cave complex, it was just the Guruji and Sridhar. And the others had gone out for some work and they were away for some days. So just the two of them were there. And Guruji said, today we're having one visitor, let's get ready. Now the thing is, they lived in a cave. Getting ready was really nothing because there's nothing to prepare. So they ate one meal a day, so that meant one more chapati and one more potato to cut and boil. Okay, that was their food. So after some time, they had kept everything ready. Sridhar was cooking for his master. So one young man comes, and the young man touches his guru's feet, and his guru touches the young man's feet. And they have their food together, and they're eating, and they're talking, and the Guruji is asking Sridhar about his learning and what he's been taught, how he's progressing in his classes. The young man is asking the Guruji about his sishyas, that is his disciples, and how they're progressing in their sadhana. And he's asking the Guruji himself questions about his own sadhana and praising. And they're telling some jokes which Sridhar doesn't understand. Sridhar was around 12 or 13 years of age at this time. Halfway through this conversation, Sridhar realizes who this young man is. Any guesses? No, it's Mahavatar Babaji. Mahavatar Babaji had come. So now Sridhar was like, electrified. He was like, this is Mahavatar Babaji sitting. So, the lunch got over and it was time for the great master to leave. And the master said, he said, don't try to follow me. Sridhar was 12, but he was like a kid, no? So he's stubborn. So Mahavatar Babaji walks out of their cave and off, on the path that led from their ashram. So Sridhar follows him. So the master Babaji just turns back and laughs, and he walks faster. Sridhar starts running. And Sridhar's running, Mahavatar Babaji is walking, but he's walking like zoom speed. And then he just disappears. He just vanishes from sight. And that was Sridhar's first darshan of the great master. Now, Sridhar had several occasions, and this is where we come back to the whole point of sitting quietly with God. He had several occasions to actually play for Swami's birthday. On, how we have musicians who come and play during Swami's birthday. So on 2 occasions, Sridhar had that great fortune. And on such occasions, Swami was so happy. Swami loves music. They say that there's 16 forms of art, but of all the 16 forms of art, God loves music the most. So Swami was so happy listening to the musical program. And so Swami comes up to Sridhar, where he's sitting, and he starts to move his hand like this. Why do you think he was doing that? To manifest something, right? Swami is going to manifest something, maybe a ring, maybe a locket or watch, whatever. Whatever it was, Swami was going to bless him with some manifestation. And you know what Sridhar did? He grabbed Swami's hands with both of his hands by the wrist. And he took Swami's hand and he put Swami's hand on his head like this and says, Baba, I don't want anything from you. I just want you. And Swami became even more happy. And so the lesson, when we sit quietly with God, is just sit quietly with God. Okay? That's all. Don't ask about your work. Don't ask about your problems. Don't ask about anything, except one thing, which I'll explain in part 3. Just one thing you can ask. But otherwise, just ask for Swami himself, for God himself. Okay? Yeah. So big, long story just to make this one point clear. Just ask for God. Okay. Now, let's move on to part 3 of sitting with the Lord. In the first part, we talked about what are the 2 steps to sitting with God. You guys tell? Number 1, just know that you're silence. I am silence. Just know it, right? You're always silence. Number 2, just be aware that God is here. You can say it if you want, but you don't have to. Just be aware that God is here. Just like the light is on in this room, but you don't look at the light. But if you're aware that the light is on, then your attention will shift to the light, right? So just shift your awareness that God is here. That's enough, okay? And then we said, do this 10 times a day. And then we gave the example of one of my old friends and how he asked Swami, I don't want anything, I just want you.